Emergency sirens wailed across the research facility as Dr. Mira rushed through the corridors, her silver-blue skin glistening under the harsh emergency lighting. The Thailand scientist had never seen readings like this before on her scanner. Something was dying out there in the cold void of space, and whatever it was had been through hell. The small escape pod tumbled end over end through the asteroid field surrounding Altara 7, its hull torn and scorched from weapons fire. Inside, Captain David Ross lay unconscious, his breathing shallow and irregular as life support systems flickered on and off. Blood seeped from a gash across his forehead, mixing with the condensation that had begun forming on the pod's failing environmental controls. 3 days had passed since the destruction of his ship, the Endeavour, during humanity's first catastrophic encounter with the hegemony. The massive alien empire had emerged from hyperspace without warning, their dark ships bristling with weapons that turned entire fleets to vapor. David had watched helplessly as his crewmates died around him, the bridge of his vessel erupting in flames before the escape pod automatically ejected him into space. Now he drifted like cosmic debris, another casualty in the hegemony's relentless expansion across the galaxy. His people back on Earth had no idea what was coming for them. No knowledge of the brutal empire that viewed all other species as obstacles to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. The hegemony had been conquering worlds for centuries, leaving behind a trail of dead civilizations and enslaved populations. On the forest moon below, the Thailand research outpost had detected the fading distress signal purely by accident. Dr. Ben, Mira's colleague, was calibrating their deep space sensors when the weak transmission cut through the background radiation. The signal was unlike anything in their databases, alien, desperate, and growing weaker by the hour. The life signs are critical, Mira announced as she burst into the command center, her large empathetic eyes wide with concern. Whatever species this is, they have maybe 60 minutes before complete system failure. The Thailands were a peaceful people who had spent millennia studying the universe around them, cataloging species and ecosystems across dozens of worlds. Their tall, graceful forms moved with purpose but never haste, their culture built on contemplation and understanding rather than action and conflict. They had never encountered humans before, but their most sacred belief held that all life was precious beyond measure. "We must attempt a rescue," Dr. Ben said, already moving toward their small shuttlecraft. "The being in that pod cannot survive much longer without immediate medical intervention." Other Thailand researchers gathered around the sensor displays, watching as the escape pod systems continued to fail. Some voiced concerns about exposing themselves to potential danger. After all, whoever was in that pod had clearly been in some kind of battle. But Elder Kara, the oldest and wisest of their group, silenced the debate with a gentle but firm gesture. "We do not abandon the dying simply because we fear the circumstances that brought them to us," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of Thailand philosophy. "If we have the power to save a life, we must use it, regardless of the risks to ourselves." The rescue shuttle launched immediately, piloted by Dr. Mira and carrying a full medical team. As they approached the damaged escape pod, they could see the extent of the destruction. Whatever had attacked this vessel possessed weapons far beyond anything the Thailands had encountered. The pod's hull bore the characteristic marks of plasma cannons, the same weapons used by the hegemony forces that had been systematically destroying peaceful civilizations across this sector. Using their tractor beams, the Thailands carefully guided the escape pod into their shuttle's cargo bay. The moment they opened the hatch, they were hit by the acrid smell of burned electronics and the metallic scent of human blood. David Ross lay crumpled in the pilot's seat, his uniform torn and his face pale from blood loss. "By the ancient stars," Dr. Ben whispered, studying the alien being with fascination and concern. "Look at the bone density, the muscle structure. This species is built for conflict in ways we never imagined." But Mira was already working, her gentle hands moving across David's injuries with practiced skill. The Thailand's advanced biotechnology could adapt to almost any species, their medical scanners quickly analyzing human physiology and adjusting treatment protocols accordingly. They worked tirelessly as they transported him back to their facility. their hearts heavy with the knowledge that this being had suffered tremendously. Back at the research station, the Thylans converted one of their laboratories into a makeshift medical bay. Their technology was far more advanced than anything humanity possessed, capable of healing wounds at the cellular level and regenerating damaged tissue. But David's injuries were severe, and his alien physiology presented challenges they had never faced before. For hours they labored over their unexpected patient, using every tool at their disposal to save his life. Dr. Mira monitored his vital signs while Dr. Ben worked to repair internal damage. Other researchers analyzed samples of his blood, trying to understand how this species processed oxygen and nutrients. The Thylan facility itself was a marvel of peaceful engineering, built into the side of a mountain and surrounded by the moon's lush forests. Nearly 1,000 Thylan refugees called this place home. Scientists, artists, philosophers, and families who had fled the advancing hegemony forces. They had come here hoping to preserve their culture and knowledge, knowing that their homeworld would soon fall to the Empire's relentless expansion. As news of the rescue spread through the facility, Thylans gathered outside the medical bay, their large eyes reflecting concern for the injured stranger. Children pressed their faces against windows, curious about the alien being their elders. Were working so hard to save. The facility's artificial gravity systems hummed quietly, maintaining comfortable conditions for beings who had evolved under different stars. Elder Kara stood vigil beside David's bed, her ancient hands clasped in prayer. She had seen the rise of the hegemony, watched as world after world fell to their brutal conquest. This being, whatever species he represented, had clearly encountered the same enemy that threatened to destroy everything the Thylans held dear. His people are likely already gone, she murmured to Dr. Mira during a brief break in their medical efforts. The hegemony shows no mercy to those who resist them. This one may be the last survivor of his entire species. But Mira continued her work with unwavering dedication, using techniques that had taken her people centuries to develop. Slowly, gradually, David's vital signs began to stabilize. His breathing became more regular, and the color started returning to his pale features. The advanced Thylan medical technology was adapting to human physiology, learning how to heal wounds that would have been fatal on any primitive world. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the quiet hum of medical equipment and the soft footsteps of Thylan physicians. Outside, the moon's twin suns began to set, painting the facility's corridors in shades of gold and amber. Still the Thylans worked, driven by their fundamental belief that every life deserved a chance at survival. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, David's eyes fluttered open. He found himself staring up at beings unlike anything he had ever imagined. Tall, graceful creatures with skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Their large eyes held infinite compassion, and their gentle movements spoke of a peaceful nature that humanity had rarely encountered among the stars. Confusion filled David's mind as he tried to process what had happened to him. The last thing he remembered was the bridge of the Endeavor exploding around him, the screams of his crewmates mixing with the sound of tearing metal. Now he lay in what appeared to be an advanced medical facility, surrounded by beings who looked like they had stepped out of humanity's oldest dreams of meeting peaceful aliens. "Please do not attempt to move too quickly," Dr. Mira said through a translation device that had been placed near his bed. "Your injuries were extensive, and our healing technology is still adapting to your physiology." David tried to sit up, wincing, as pain shot through his ribs. The Thylans moved to support him, their gentle hands helping him find a comfortable position. He could see others gathering outside the medical bay, more of these silver-skinned beings, all watching him with expressions of genuine concern. "Who are you people?" he asked, his voice hoarse from days of unconsciousness. "Where am I?" Through the translation device, Dr. Ben explained their situation. The Thylans were refugees themselves, survivors of the hegemony's relentless expansion across the galaxy. They had established this research facility on Altara 7 as a sanctuary, hoping to preserve their scientific knowledge and cultural heritage before their entire civilization was wiped out. We found your escape pod drifting through the asteroid field, Dr. Mira explained. You had been unconscious for 3 days with severe injuries. Our sensors detected that you were dying, so we brought you here for medical treatment. As David listened to their story, a growing sense of dread filled his chest. These beings had saved his life, showing him kindness and compassion that he had rarely encountered even among his own people. Yet they were all living under a death sentence, waiting for the hegemony to arrive and destroy everything they had built. How many of you are here? David asked, looking around at the faces gathered outside his room. Elder Kara stepped forward, her ancient features creased with sadness. Nearly 1,000 souls call this facility home. Scientists, teachers, artists, families with children. We are all that remains of our civilization after the hegemony destroyed our homeworld. The weight of their situation hit David like a physical blow. These gentle beings who had risked everything to save a complete stranger were facing extinction. Their research facility, built with such care and hope, would soon be nothing but debris floating in space. The children he could see playing in the corridors outside would never grow up to continue their people's peaceful traditions. The hegemony fleet is only weeks away, Dr. Ben continued, his voice heavy with resignation. We have no weapons, no military defenses. Our people have spent millennia pursuing knowledge and art, never imagining we would need to fight for our survival. David struggled to his feet, ignoring the pain that lanced through his body. You don't understand my people, humanity. We're still out there fighting. Earth hasn't fallen yet. If I can get a message to them, tell them what's happening here. The Thylans looked at him with gentle skepticism. They had heard such hopes before from other refugee species, desperate words from beings who couldn't accept that their civilizations were gone. Elder Kara placed a comforting hand on David's shoulder, her touch radiating the same compassion that had motivated them to save his life. Young human, she said softly, we saved you because it was the right thing to do, not because we expected salvation in return. The hegemony has destroyed countless species who thought they could resist. Your people are likely already gone or will be soon. But David refused to accept defeat. He had seen humanity at its best and worst, knew that his species possessed a stubbornness that bordered on insanity when faced with extinction. The hegemony might have superior technology and numbers, but they had never encountered a species quite like humanity before. I need access to your communications array, he said, his voice growing stronger with determination. Let me try to contact Earth. Even if it's a long shot, don't these people deserve that chance? The Thylans exchanged glances, their large eyes reflecting uncertainty. Their communication systems were powerful enough to reach across several star systems, but using them would risk exposing their location to hegemony monitoring stations. It could mean the difference between having weeks to live and having only days. Dr. Mira was the first to speak. If we do this, we may be signing our own death warrants. The hegemony tracks long-range communications. They will find us even sooner than planned. Then we die a few days earlier than we would have anyway. David replied, but maybe, just maybe, we give your children a chance to live. The debate continued for hours as Thylans gathered in their main assembly hall. Some argued for caution, pointing out that they had responsibilities to preserve their research and knowledge for as long as possible. Others supported David's plan, believing that even a slim hope was better than waiting helplessly for death. Throughout the discussion, David learned more about Thylan culture and philosophy. They were a people who had never known war, who had built their entire civilization around the pursuit of understanding and beauty. Their art filled the facility's corridors, sculptures that seemed to capture the essence of starlight, paintings that depicted worlds where peace reigned eternal. The children especially fascinated him. Young Thylans moved with the same grace as their elders, but their eyes held a curiosity that reminded him of human children. They played games that involved cooperation rather than competition, building complex structures together and sharing their creations with obvious joy. Finally, Elder Kara called for a decision. We came here to preserve life and knowledge. If there is even the smallest chance that this human's people can help us, then we must take that risk. Our ancestors would forgive us for dying in hope rather than despair. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the Thylans had configured their most powerful communication array to broadcast on human frequencies. David worked with their technicians, explaining Earth's military communication protocols and encoding his message in ways that only his own species would understand. He transmitted everything: the location of Altara 7, detailed intelligence about hegemony fleet movements, tactical analysis of their weapons and shield technology. Most importantly, he told them about the Thylans, about a species so peaceful and compassionate that they had risked their own lives to save a complete stranger. For 7 agonizing days there was no response. The hegemony's advanced scouts had already begun probing the outer edges of the system, their dark ships appearing on sensors like harbingers of doom. Thylan families spent more time together, parents, holding their children close while trying to maintain hope in the face of approaching annihilation. David found himself walking through the facility's corridors, observing the quiet dignity with which these beings faced their fate. They continued their research, their art, their daily routines, refusing to let fear overwhelm their essential nature. Teachers still conducted classes for the children, scientists still pursued their experiments, artists still created beauty in defiance of the approaching darkness. On the 7th day, as hegemony scouts began more aggressive reconnaissance of the system, David's communicator finally crackled to life. The voice that emerged was crisp and professional, carrying the distinctive accent of Earth's military command. "Captain Ross, this is Admiral Hayes of Earth Defense Force. We've received your transmission and analyzed your intelligence reports." David's hands trembled as he responded. "Admiral, the situation here is critical. These beings saved my life. When they could have saved themselves, they're facing extinction and they deserve better." There was a pause, filled with the background chatter of what sounded like a massive military operation. Then Admiral Hayes spoke again, her voice carrying a tone that made David's heart race with unexpected hope. "Captain, you tell those aliens. They saved the wrong human if they wanted someone who'd give up without a fight. We're mobilizing everything we have. Every ship, every weapon, every person willing to make the trip. These hegemony bastards are about to learn why you don't mess with humanity's friends." Throughout the facility, Thylans gathered around communication stations as David broadcast the news. For the first time in months, hope flickered in their large eyes. Children who had never known anything but refugee life began to smile. Scientists, who had resigned themselves to leaving their work unfinished, started making new plans. But even as hope grew, the reality of their situation remained grim. The hegemony fleet was vast and experienced, equipped with weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations. Humanity was young and untested against such overwhelming odds. The battle for Altara 7 would determine not just the fate of the Thylans, but possibly the future of both species. Space around Altara 7 exploded into chaos as the hegemony warfleet tore through hyperspace like a wound in reality itself. 300 ships emerged from the void, their hulls black as deep space and bristling with weapons designed to crack planets. At their head flew the massive dreadnought Dominator, a vessel so large it cast shadows over entire moons. Warlord Brutus stood on his command bridge, his reptilian features twisted into something resembling satisfaction. The massive alien had led hegemony forces for decades, crushing species after species with methodical brutality. His own people had been among the Empire's first conquests, transformed from peaceful traders into ruthless warriors through generations of conditioning and genetic manipulation. "Another pathetic refuge to cleanse," he growled, studying the tactical displays showing Altara 7. "These Thylans have nowhere to run this time. We will make their destruction quick and complete." His subordinates, drawn from dozens of conquered species, nodded in agreement. They had learned long ago that showing enthusiasm for destruction was the only way to survive in hegemony ranks. Those who showed mercy or hesitation disappeared into the Empire's slave pits, never to be seen again. On the surface of Altara 7, The Thylans watched their censors with the same quiet resignation they had shown for months. They gathered in family groups, parents holding children close, elders sharing final stories and wisdom. Their beautiful facility, carved into living rock and surrounded by gardens, would soon be nothing but vapor and debris. 300 ships, Dr. Ben reported to the assembled refugees. More than enough to sterilize this entire system. We should use our remaining time to complete the data transfers to the emergency archives. But David stood in their command center, his eyes fixed on displays that showed empty space beyond the hegemony fleet. Somewhere out there, if Admiral Hayes had kept her promise, humanity was coming. The question was whether they would arrive, in time and in sufficient numbers to make a difference. They're not scanning for additional ships, he observed, watching the hegemony fleet's deployment patterns. They assume this will be another easy conquest like all the others, Dr. Mira joined him at the sensor station, her silver-blue skin pale with stress. David, even if your people come, how can they possibly match such a force? The hegemony has been conquering worlds for centuries. Their technology, their experience. Before David could answer, space around the hegemony fleet began to shimmer. Reality twisted and buckled as ships emerged from hyperspace. But these weren't the sleek warships the Thylans expected. Instead, a chaotic mix of vessels appeared, military cruisers alongside cargo haulers, mining ships next to luxury liners, research vessels flying in formation with converted passenger transports. Admiral Hayes to Altara 7, came the transmission that filled the Thylan facility with shocked silence. This is the Earth Defense Force, plus anyone else who could carry weapons and make the trip. We're here to return a favor, the human fleet. Continued to emerge from hyperspace in waves. Ship after ship materialized, each one different from the last. There were proper military vessels with gleaming hulls and ranks of missile pods. But there were also freight haulers with plasma cutters welded to their outer hulls, mining ships equipped with industrial explosives, even civilian spacecraft that had been hastily converted to carry weapons. David stared at the displays in amazement. As the count climbed higher and higher, 200 ships, 400, 600. The numbers kept rising until over 800 vessels of every conceivable type had joined the battle formation around Altara 7. By the ancient stars, Elder Kara whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Your entire species has come to help us, Admiral Hayes commanded from the flagship Retribution, but she wasn't alone in leading this unprecedented armada. The Chinese Space Navy had sent their newest destroyers. The European Defense Consortium contributed their experimental cruisers. The African Union fleet brought fast attack craft. Even nations that had never cooperated before had put aside their differences for this mission. But it wasn't just military vessels that had answered the call. Corporate executives had volunteered their cargo ships. Mining consortiums had offered their industrial fleet. Wealthy civilians had converted their luxury yachts into makeshift warships. Students from Earth's space academies flew alongside grizzled veterans of asteroid mining operations. This is impossible, Warlord Brutus snarled, studying the tactical displays that showed the growing human fleet. Where did this species acquire so many vessels? Our intelligence reported a primitive civilization with limited spacefaring capability. His tactical officer, a nervous creature from a species that had been enslaved generations ago, stammered a response. Sir, they appear to have converted civilian ships for military use. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, even passenger liners. They're not following standard military doctrine. Brutus studied the human formation with growing unease. The ships weren't arranged in neat battle lines like proper military forces. Instead, they swarmed through space like angry insects, each vessel moving independently. Some were clearly homemade, conversions, bristling with improvised weapons and armor plating. Others looked like they had been designed by committees of madmen. What kind of species converts passenger ships into warships? He muttered, watching a converted cruise liner take position alongside military destroyers. These humans fight like they have nothing to lose. But on Altara 7, David understood the truth. Humanity hadn't sent every available ship because they were desperate. They had mobilized their entire civilian fleet because the Thylans had shown them something precious, proof that compassion and kindness still existed in a galaxy filled with violence. The mining ship Prospector, commanded by Captain Williams, had been hauling asteroids just days before. Now its industrial plasma cutters were aimed at hegemony dreadnoughts. The luxury liner Pacific Dreams had been hosting wealthy tourists. Its captain, Maria Santos, had volunteered her ship and crew the moment they heard about the peaceful aliens who had saved a human life. All human vessels, this is Admiral Hayes, the transmission echoed across both fleets. You know why we're here. These Thylans risked everything to save one of our own. Today we show the galaxy what humanity does for its friends. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of voices answered the call, ship captains and crew members from every nation and corporation on Earth. They spoke different languages and came from different cultures, but they were united by a shared determination to protect the beings who had shown such kindness to one of their own. Warlord Brutus opened a communication channel to the human fleet, his voice dripping with contempt. Unknown vessels, you are interfering with hegemony operations. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. Admiral Hayes responded without hesitation. Hegemony Fleet, this is Admiral Patricia Hayes of Earth Defense Force. You threatened the wrong species when you came for the Thylans. Today you learn why humans don't abandon their friends. The space around Altara 7 crackled with tension as two vastly different philosophies prepared for battle. The Hegemony Fleet maintained perfect formation, their ships arrayed in textbook assault patterns developed over centuries of conquest. They had overwhelming firepower and superior technology, advantages that had crushed countless civilizations. But the human fleet defied every rule of military engagement. Ships moved in chaotic patterns that should have resulted in collisions. Converted civilian vessels took positions alongside military cruisers. Industrial equipment had been repurposed into weapons that existed nowhere in hegemony, tactical databases. They're not fighting like soldiers, Brutus's tactical officer observed. They're fighting like something else entirely. The warlord's eyes narrowed as he studied the human formation. In decades of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. Usually species either submitted immediately or fought with the desperate courage of the doomed. But these humans seemed to be approaching the battle with something resembling anticipation. Begin the assault, he ordered. Let us see how long their enthusiasm lasts against hegemony firepower. As the two fleets moved toward each other, the Thylans on Altara 7 watched in fascination and terror. Their peaceful nature had never prepared them for warfare on such a scale. Yet they found themselves transfixed by the sight of an entire species risking everything to protect strangers they had never met. Children pressed against observation windows, their large eyes wide with amazement. Adults who had never seen combat tried to understand the tactical displays. Scientists who had studied stellar phenomena now watched the greatest experiment of all. Whether kindness could triumph over brutality in a galaxy that seemed to reward only strength. The first shots fired in the Battle of Altara 7 came not from massive capital ship weapons, but from the converted mining vessel Prospector, as it dove straight into the heart of the hegemony formation. Captain Williams, a grizzled asteroid miner, turned improvised warrior, ignored every tactical protocol ever written as he aimed his industrial plasma cutters at the enemy dreadnought's hull. This is for every peaceful world you bastards have destroyed, he growled into his communicator, firing cutting beams that had been designed to carve up space rocks. The superheated plasma sliced through hegemony armor like it was tissue paper, creating massive breaches in ships that had seemed invulnerable moments before. Warlord Brutus watched in disbelief as his perfectly ordered battle line dissolved into chaos. The humans weren't following any military doctrine he recognized. Instead of engaging in conventional ship-to-ship combat, they were using tactics that defied every principle of space warfare. Cargo haulers released clouds of metallic debris that played havoc with targeting systems. Converted passenger liners used their luxury amenities as improvised weapons platforms. What are they doing? His tactical officer shouted over the alarms. Our shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. They're using industrial equipment against us. The cruise ship Pacific Dreams, under the command of Captain Santos, had been transformed into something unprecedented. Its passenger decks had been converted into mobile hospitals, with medical teams standing by to treat wounded from both sides. But its entertainment systems had been repurposed as electronic warfare platforms, jamming hegemony communications with recordings of human music and laughter. Admiral Hayes coordinated the chaos from the bridge of the Retribution, but she had given her fleet commanders unprecedented freedom to improvise. All vessels, you have autonomy to engage targets of opportunity. Remember, we're not here to follow the rules. We're here to win. The response was immediate and creative in ways that boggled the hegemony forces. Commander Liu of the freight hauler Morningstar had packed his cargo holds with mining explosives and titanium rods. He flew his ship like a guided missile, ejecting his deadly cargo directly into enemy formations before peeling away at the last second. Dr. Rodriguez, who normally ran supplies to Mars colonies, had converted her transport vessel into a mobile repair platform. She darted between damaged human ships using industrial fabricators to patch hull breaches and jury-rig destroyed systems. When hegemony fighters tried to intercept her, she released clouds of nanoscale repair bots that clogged their engine intakes on Altera 7. The Thylans watched this unprecedented display of human ingenuity with growing amazement. These beings didn't just fight. They adapted, improvised, turned every disadvantage into opportunity. When hegemony ships tried to use their superior shields, humans simply flew inside the protective barriers and attacked from within. When energy weapons failed to penetrate enemy armor, human crews rammed their ships directly into hegemony vessels. They fight like they have everything to save, Dr. Mira observed, her large eyes reflecting the light from explosions blooming across space. David nodded grimly as he watched the tactical displays. That's exactly right. They're not fighting for territory or resources. They're fighting for the idea that kindness deserves protection. The battle reached new levels of intensity as both fleets fully engaged. Hegemony dreadnoughts fired massive energy beams that could vaporize smaller human ships, but for every vessel destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. The human fleet fought with a ferocity that went beyond simple courage. They battled with the desperate creativity of a species that refused to let good beings suffer when they had the power to help. Captain Peterson of the research vessel Discovery had spent years studying stellar phenomena. Now he used that knowledge to predict solar flare activity, timing his attacks to coincide with natural electromagnetic pulses that disrupted hegemony shields. Dr. Kim, an expert in asteroid geology, used her knowledge of mineral compositions to target the weak points in enemy hull armor. The converted pleasure yacht Starlight Princess, owned by billionaire philanthropist Robert Chen, had become an unlikely command vessel. Its luxury communications suite had been upgraded with military-grade equipment, allowing it to coordinate attacks across multiple battle groups. Chen himself stood on the bridge, no longer a wealthy businessman but a volunteer in humanity's greatest cause. Hegemony Fleet, this is Robert Chen aboard the Starlight Princess, he broadcast on all frequencies. I've spent my life believing that wealth should be used to help others. Today I'm using everything I have to protect beings who embody that principle. Warlord Brutus found himself facing something his empire's doctrine had no answer for, an enemy that refused to follow established patterns of warfare. His perfectly trained fleet, accustomed to overwhelming technologically inferior opponents, began to falter against humanity's chaotic tactics. The human ships moved like living things rather than military vessels. They swarmed around larger hegemony craft, using their smaller size and greater maneuverability to stay inside the enemy's weapons envelope. Industrial mining lasers carved through armor that had been designed to deflect military-grade weapons. Makeshift missile pods fired salvos of improvised ordnance that exploded in patterns no hegemony computer could predict. "Sir, we're losing formation integrity," his tactical officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. "The humans are using swarm tactics. They're targeting our command and control systems with weapons we've never encountered before." But what truly unnerved the hegemony forces wasn't just the humans' unconventional tactics, it was their attitude toward casualties. When hegemony ships were crippled, human vessels immediately moved to render aid. Rescue shuttles launched from converted passenger liners. Medical teams from civilian hospitals treated enemy wounded with the same care they showed their own people. The luxury liner Ocean's Pride had been converted into a massive hospital ship. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been enjoying a vacation cruise just weeks before, now coordinated medical teams treating injured hegemony soldiers. She worked alongside alien physicians from a dozen different species, all united in their determination to save lives regardless of which side they had been fighting on. "This is impossible," a wounded hegemony officer whispered as Dr. Chen treated his injuries. "We tried to kill you. Why are you helping us?" Dr. Chen looked up from her work, her hands steady as she sealed the alien's wounds. "Because someone very wise once told me that every life has value. The Thylans taught us that showing mercy isn't weakness, it's the highest form of strength." Word of humanity's unprecedented approach to warfare spread through the hegemony ranks like wildfire. Soldiers who had been conditioned to expect death or slavery from their enemies instead found themselves receiving medical care and genuine compassion. Many had never experienced kindness from their own commanders, let alone from the people they were fighting. Admiral Hayes watched the tactical displays with growing satisfaction. The human fleet was taking heavy casualties, but they were inflicting even heavier damage on the hegemony forces. More importantly, they were proving that Earth's approach to conflict could succeed even against seemingly overwhelming odds. "All civilian vessels, this is Admiral Hayes," she broadcast to the converted ships fighting alongside her military units. "I want you to know that your courage today has exceeded anything in military history. You've shown the galaxy that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they fight for the right reasons." The response came from hundreds of voices across the fleet: shop owners and teachers, engineers and artists, students and retirees. They had come from every walk of life, united by their determination to protect beings who had shown humanity the true meaning of compassion. As the battle raged around them, the Thylans on Altara 7 began to understand something profound about their human rescuers. These beings didn't just possess advanced technology or superior numbers. They fought with something the hegemony had never encountered: the combined power of an entire civilization that had decided to risk everything for strangers who had shown kindness to one of their own. The tide of battle slowly but inevitably began to turn. Hegemony ships that had seemed invincible found themselves overwhelmed by swarms of human vessels, using tactics that existed nowhere in their databases. Industrial equipment proved more effective than military weapons, civilian determination proved stronger than professional training, and most importantly, mercy proved more powerful than brutality. The massive flagships Retribution and Dominator circled each other like wounded giants, their hulls scarred by weapons fire and their shields flickering on the edge of collapse. Around them, the battle raged with increasing desperation as both fleets threw everything they had into what everyone knew would be the decisive engagement of the war. Admiral Hayes stood on her bridge, blood trickling from a cut above her eye as emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the command center. Her ship had taken massive damage, but her crew continued fighting with the same determination that had brought them across the galaxy. She watched as the hegemony fleet slowly began to crumble under humanity's relentless assault. "Admiral, we're detecting massive surrender signals from the enemy fleet," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Williams. "Over 60 hegemony vessels have powered down their weapons and are requesting terms." But it wasn't the military victory that shocked Warlord Brutus as he stood amid the wreckage of his command bridge. It was what happened next that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. Instead of delivering killing blows to the disabled hegemony ships, the human fleet began executing something they called Protocol Shepherd. Across the battlefield, every civilian vessel that had joined the fight suddenly changed course. Instead of pressing their advantage, they raced toward the crippled hegemony ships. But they weren't moving in for the kill, they were launching rescue operations. The converted cruise ship Pacific Dreams positioned itself alongside a burning hegemony destroyer. Captain Santos and her crew, many of whom had been serving cocktails to tourists just weeks before, now worked frantically to evacuate enemy survivors. They pulled injured aliens from wrecked compartments, provided medical aid, treated prisoners with dignity that many had never experienced even from their own commanders. "This is impossible," Brutus growled, watching his tactical displays in confusion. "They have us beaten. Why aren't they finishing us off?" The answer came from the most unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, the human physician who had been treating hegemony wounded throughout the battle, appeared on his communication screen. Behind her, he could see injured soldiers from his own fleet receiving medical care from human doctors and "Nurses, Warlord Brutus, this is Dr. Chen aboard the hospital ship Ocean's Pride. I have something to show you." The screen split to show multiple scenes: human rescue teams pulling hegemony survivors from destroyed ships, medical facilities where former enemies worked side by side to save lives, even converted cargo vessels providing food and shelter to displaced alien refugees. It was a sight that defied everything Brutus had learned about conquest and warfare. "Your people are receiving the same medical care as our own wounded," Dr. Chen continued. "No one is being executed or enslaved. We're treating everyone as we would want to be treated ourselves." Commander Voss, one of Brutus's most trusted lieutenants, appeared on another screen. The reptilian officer was lying in what was clearly a human medical facility, his injuries carefully bandaged. Around him, other hegemony soldiers were being treated by human physicians who showed no anger or desire for revenge. "Sir," Voss said weakly, "they pulled me from my ship when it was about to explode. The humans risked their own lives to save me. I don't understand why." The answer came from Elder Kara of the Thylans, who had been transported to the human flagship to witness the battle's end. Her gentle voice carried across all communication channels as she addressed both fleets. "This is how civilized beings wage war," she said simply. "They fight to protect the innocent, not to destroy their enemies. They understand that true victory comes not from crushing those who oppose them, but from showing them a better way." Throughout the hegemony fleet, soldiers who had been raised on brutality and conquest found themselves confronting an entirely new concept. Many of these beings had been forced into military service, their own species conquered and enslaved by the Empire. They had never been shown mercy by their superiors, never experienced compassion from those in power. Lieutenant Korax, a young officer from a species that had been enslaved 3 generations ago, sat in the human detention facility aboard the converted luxury liner Starlight Princess. The accommodations were better than his quarters had been. On his own ship, human guards brought him food, medical attention, even books and entertainment. "Why are you treating us like this?" he asked one of his guards, a former accountant named Bob who had volunteered for the rescue mission. "We tried to kill you. Your people died fighting us. Why show us kindness?" Bob sat down across from the alien prisoner, his expression thoughtful. "My daughter asked me the same question when I told her I was joining this mission. I told her about the Thylans, about how they saved Captain Ross when they could have just let him die. I realized that if we want to build a better galaxy, someone has to start showing mercy first." Word of humanity's unprecedented approach to warfare spread through the hegemony ranks like a virus of hope. For the first time in centuries of brutal expansion, enemy soldiers began to question their orders, their purpose, their entire worldview. Many had been told that showing weakness invited destruction, that mercy was a luxury only the strong could afford. Dr. Rodriguez, the supply runner, turned combat medic, found herself treating a hegemony soldier who had been shot while trying to surrender. As she worked to save his life, the alien looked up at her with eyes that held centuries of pain. "We were taught that weakness invites destruction," he whispered. "But you saved a being who couldn't fight back. And instead of destroying you, they brought an entire fleet to protect you. How were our teachers so wrong?" The revelation spread through the hegemony forces with increasing speed. Soldiers began laying down their weapons not because they were defeated, but because they were witnessing something they had never imagined possible. An enemy that fought with ferocity but showed mercy in victory. A species that risked everything to protect strangers who had shown them kindness. Admiral Hayes opened a communication channel to the entire hegemony fleet. Her image appeared on screens throughout their vessels, showing a human leader who looked tired but determined, scarred by battle, but not hardened by it. "Soldiers of the hegemony," she said, her voice carrying to thousands of alien beings who had never heard such words from an enemy commander. "This battle is over, but this doesn't have to be the end for any of you. We didn't come here to destroy you. We came here to protect beings who showed one of our people extraordinary kindness." She gestured to the tactical displays showing human rescue operations throughout the battlefield. "You've seen how we treat our prisoners, how we care for your wounded. This is who we are. This is who we choose to be, even in war. The question now is who you choose to be." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the hegemony fleet, soldiers began powering down their weapons, not in surrender, but in something approaching hope. They had seen a different way of thinking about conflict, about power, about what it meant to be strong. Warlord Brutus stood alone on his damaged bridge, watching as his empire began to crumble, not from military defeat, but from the erosion of its fundamental beliefs. His soldiers were abandoning their posts not because they were cowards, but because they had glimpsed something better than the brutal philosophy that had ruled their lives. "This isn't possible," he muttered, staring at the displays showing human medical teams treating his wounded soldiers with the same care they showed their own people. "How can mercy be stronger than force? How can kindness defeat an empire built on strength?" The answer came from Captain David Ross, whose voice reached him from the surface of Altara 7. "Because someone very wise once showed us that every life has value. The Thylans taught us that true strength isn't about crushing your enemies, it's about turning them into friends." 2 years had passed since the Battle of Altara 7, and the galaxy bore little resemblance to the empire-dominated wasteland it had been before. The great hegemony, which had terrorized countless worlds for centuries, had collapsed not through military conquest but through the simple power of showing mercy to enemies. What rose from its ashes was something unprecedented in galactic history, a true alliance of equals. Captain David Ross stood in the memorial garden that now occupied the central courtyard of what had become known as Unity Station. The former Thylan research facility had grown into a bustling center of interspecies cooperation, its original building surrounded by new structures representing dozens of different civilizations. Each architectural style told a story of rescue, redemption, and hope. "Hard to believe it all started with a single escape pod," said Commander Voss, the former hegemony officer who now served as director of refugee integration. The reptilian being had undergone a remarkable transformation from brutal enforcer to compassionate administrator. His office walls were covered with letters from displaced beings who had found new homes through his programs. David smiled as he watched the daily miracle that had become commonplace at Unity Station. Human children played alongside young Thylans, their laughter mixing with the musical tones of crystalline beings from the Andorian collective. Former hegemony soldiers worked side by side with their former enemies, building gardens where weapons, factories had once stood. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. The hegemony's collapse had left a power vacuum that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. Warlords fought over the Empire's remains while countless enslaved species struggled to rebuild their shattered civilizations. It had taken months of careful diplomacy and humanitarian aid to prevent the region from descending into chaos. Dr. Mira approached through the garden paths, her silver-blue skin glowing with the contentment that had replaced the fear she had carried for so long. As the new director of scientific cooperation, she oversaw research projects that would have been impossible under the old regime. Teams of scientists from dozens of species worked together, sharing knowledge that had been hoarded by the hegemony for generations. "The morning briefing is ready," she told David. "Admiral Hayes is connecting from the flagship Discovery, and Elder Kara wants to discuss the integration of the Zephyrian refugees." The Discovery was no longer a warship, but a mobile command center for the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Admiral Hayes had been promoted to Supreme Commander, but she insisted on being called simply Admiral. Her fleet now consisted not of weapons platforms but of hospital ships, cargo vessels carrying humanitarian supplies, and exploration craft seeking out lost colonies and hidden refuges. As they walked toward the command center, David reflected on how much had changed. The Thylan philosophy of universal compassion had spread through human space like wildfire. Earth's military academies now taught courses in diplomatic intervention alongside tactical warfare. Every human vessel carried Thylan advisors, their natural empathy helping to bridge cultural gaps that had seemed insurmountable. The command center itself embodied the new galactic order. Holographic displays showed not battle formations but relief operations. Instead of tracking enemy movements, tactical officers monitored refugee convoys and humanitarian missions. The screens that had once displayed weapons targeting now showed agricultural development projects and medical supply distributions. "Good morning, Unity Station." Admiral Hayes appeared on the main display, her image transmitted from somewhere in the Outer Rim territories. "I'm pleased to report that the liberation of the Kepler mining colonies is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've freed another 10,000 enslaved beings and restored self-governance to 12 worlds." The Galactic Liberation Alliance had become something unique in interstellar politics, a military force dedicated to freeing rather than conquering. Their ships carried weapons, but they were used primarily to break the chains of oppression, rather than forge new ones. Former hegemony territory was being systematically liberated, its slave populations freed, and its resources redistributed to support reconstruction efforts. "We've also received first contact from the Meridian Cluster," Admiral Hayes continued. "They're requesting assistance in dealing with remnant hegemony forces. I'm dispatching the diplomatic cruiser Harmony with a full medical and engineering support team." Elder Kara, now well into her second century but still vital and wise, stepped forward to address the assembly. Her presence commanded instant respect from beings across dozens of species. She had become something of a spiritual leader for the Alliance, her gentle wisdom helping to guide policy decisions that affected billions of lives. "The Zephyrian refugees have agreed to our integration proposals," she announced. "They're grateful for the opportunity to rebuild their civilization on New Thylos. Our cultural exchange programs are helping them preserve their traditions while adapting to their new home." New Thylos was one of the Alliance's greatest success stories, a world where multiple refugee species had come together to build something entirely new. Former enemies worked side by side in sprawling cities that blended architectural styles from across the galaxy. Gardens designed by Thylan botanists grew beside marketplaces where reformed hegemony soldiers sold crafts to human tourists, the Kwai. Transformation of individual beings had been even more remarkable than the political changes. Commander Peterson, the former mining ship captain who had carved up hegemony dreadnoughts with industrial plasma cutters, now used the same equipment to help terraform dead worlds. Dr. Chen had established medical schools that trained physicians from dozens of species in techniques that combined the best of everyone's knowledge. "There's something else," Admiral Hayes said, her expression growing serious. "Long-range sensors have detected what appears to be another empire expanding into the former hegemony territory, the Obsidian Dominion. They're following the same pattern of conquest and enslavement." A hush fell over the command center as beings from across the galaxy contemplated this new threat. Many still carried scars from their encounters with the hegemony. The thought of facing another such empire filled them with dread. But David stepped forward, his voice calm and confident. "Then we do what we did before. We show them there's a better way." "It won't be that simple," warned Captain Liu, who now commanded one of the Alliance's largest hospital ships. "The Obsidian Dominion has been watching our expansion. They know our tactics, our philosophy. They might not be as susceptible to mercy as the hegemony was." Elder Kara moved to the center of the room, her ancient eyes reflecting the wisdom of ages. "Perhaps not. But we have something they don't. We have the living proof that compassion works. Every freed slave, every reformed soldier, every rebuilt world stands as testimony to the power of showing mercy." She gestured to the diverse group assembled in the command center. "Look around you. Human soldiers stand beside former hegemony officers. Thailand scientists work with refugees from a dozen different species. Children who should have been enemies play together in our gardens. This is our greatest weapon against tyranny. The Alliance's response to the Obsidian Dominion threat would be unprecedented in military history. Instead of building weapons and fortifications, they launched the largest humanitarian operation ever conceived. Hospital ships, construction vessels, and supply convoys raced toward the border regions. Their mission wasn't to fight the Dominion, but to undermine it by offering something better to its subjects. Dr. Rodriguez, the former supply runner, now led massive refugee processing centers that could handle entire planetary populations. Her teams had perfected techniques for rapidly integrating displaced beings into Alliance society. They offered not just food and shelter, but education, medical care, and most importantly, hope for a better future. Every being we save from the Dominion is a victory, she explained to her staff. Every refugee we help becomes an ambassador for our way of life. We're not just fighting an empire, we're proving that there's an alternative to oppression. The memorial garden where David had started his morning walk had grown to encompass the entire station. Paths wound between monuments honoring the victims of tyranny and gardens celebrating the diversity of galactic life. At the center stood a simple stone marker with an inscription in hundreds of languages. In memory of all who suffered under oppression, in gratitude to those who chose compassion over conquest, in hope for a galaxy where every being is valued and every life has meaning. As evening fell over Unity Station, beings from across the galaxy gathered for the daily ceremony of remembrance. They came from worlds that had been enslaved, species that had been conquered, civilizations that had been nearly destroyed. But they also came from places that had been liberated, societies that had been rebuilt, communities that had found hope again. David stood beside Dr. Mira as they watched the ceremony, reflecting on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. A single act of compassion, the Thailand's decision to save one dying human, had sparked a transformation that was still spreading across the galaxy. Do you think we'll succeed against the Obsidian Dominion? Mira asked quietly. David smiled, watching as former enemies embraced like family members. I think we've already succeeded. We've proven that mercy is stronger than force, that kindness can triumph over cruelty. Whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together. The stars above Unity Station shone with promise, each one representing worlds where beings lived, in freedom rather than fear. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but it was also filled with hope. The Alliance would continue to grow, not through conquest, but through compassion. They had learned the most important lesson in the universe. Sometimes saving one life can save everyone.